Whispers of a Romance Sleep Story, presented by Bedtime Stories. Make yourself comfortable, close your eyes, take a slow, deep breath. And now, let the story begin. The old lighthouse on the cliffs of Starfall Cove pulsed its gentle light across the inky canvas of the night sky, a comforting heartbeat for the sleepy coastal town nestled beneath. Elara Vance knew that light intimately. It was a constant in her life, much like the scent of old paper and freshly brewed tea that permeated her small independent bookstore. The Story Nook. Elara loved her shop. It was more than just a business. It was a sanctuary, a quiet haven where the real world could be momentarily forgotten amidst the rustle of turning pages and the murmur of distant waves. Every morning, before the first rays of sun kissed the whitewashed houses of Starfall Cove, Elara would be there, unlocking the heavy oak door, switching on the warm glow of the lamps, and setting the kettle to boil. She'd dust the shelves, arrange the new arrivals with meticulous care, and then, with a steaming mug of Earl Grey in hand, she'd settle into her favorite armchair by the window. From there, she could watch the town awaken, the fishermen's boats heading out to sea, the bakery lights flickering on, the first hardy souls taking their morning strolls along the pebble beach. Elara was a creature of habit, and in her quiet routine, she found a profound sense of peace. She was 32, with a cascade of rich auburn hair that often escaped its braid, eyes the color of sea glass, and a smile that rarely reached her lips but often sparkled in her gaze when she spoke of a particularly beloved book. Today, however, there was a subtle shift in the air, a whisper of something new carried on the salty breeze. Perhaps it was the crispness of the autumn air, promising cooler days and the comfort of sweaters and crackling fires. Or perhaps it was something else entirely, a quiet premonition that hummed beneath the surface of her usual contentment. The bell above the door chimed, a sound Elara loved. It wasn't a jarring clang, but a soft melodic ring that always felt like an invitation. She looked up from the first chapter of a gothic romance she'd been enjoying, a faint blush rising to her cheeks as she realized she'd been so engrossed she hadn't heard the door open. Standing just inside, shaking droplets of rain from a dark, worn canvas jacket, was a man she hadn't seen before. Starfall Cove was a small town. New faces were rare, and memorable ones even rarer. This man was definitely memorable. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled the doorway, and hair the color of rich earth, slightly damp and falling over a thoughtful brow. His eyes, when they met hers, were a startling shade of blue, like the deeper parts of the ocean just beyond the cove. There was a quiet intensity about him, a stillness that suggested he was observing everything. He offered a hesitant smile, a slow unfolding that softened the serious lines around his mouth. "Good morning," he said, his voice a low rumble that seemed to fit the cozy atmosphere of the shop perfectly. "I hope I'm not too early." Elara, suddenly feeling a little flustered, managed to return his smile. "Not at all. The Story Nook is always ready for early birds. Can I help you find anything?" He took a step further in, letting his gaze sweep over the packed shelves, the comfortable armchairs, the small tea counter in the corner. "Just browsing for now. I just arrived in town last night, Liam Beckett." He extended a hand, and Elara found herself taking it, her palm suddenly warm against his. His grip was firm but gentle. "Elara Vance. Welcome to Starfall Cove, Mr. Beckett." "Liam, please." He nodded towards the tea counter. "Do you happen to have coffee? I'm afraid my internal clock is still a few hours behind after the drive." "Of course." Elara gestured. "Plenty. And pastries if you're hungry. Make yourself at home." Liam murmured his thanks and headed towards the counter, his movements unhurried. Elara watched him, a flutter in her chest she tried to ignore. She prided herself on being unflappable, a curator of stories, not a participant in dramatic ones. Yet, there was something about Liam Beckett that had already begun to write a new chapter in her quiet existence. He ordered a black coffee and a blueberry scone, then wandered back into the main section of the shop, his gaze still lingering on the spines of books. Elara watched him from behind the counter as she prepared his order. He had the air of someone who belonged in a library, or perhaps on a windswept cliff, contemplating the horizon. A quiet observer. When she brought his coffee and scone to a small table by the window overlooking the street, he was holding a worn copy of a collection of maritime poems. "You have excellent taste," he commented, noticing her approach. "I haven't seen this edition in years." "It's a favorite," Elara confessed, setting down his tray. A gift from my grandfather. He was a fisherman, and swore these poems captured the true soul of the sea. Liam gently ran a thumb over the cover. I can imagine. There's a certain magic to a life lived by the ocean. He looked out the window, watching a seagull glide effortlessly through the gray sky. It's what drew me here, actually. Starfall Cove has a reputation for its untouched beauty. It does, Ilara agreed, her voice softer than usual. We try to keep it that way. Are you on holiday, Liam? He took a sip of his coffee. Something like that. I'm a travel writer, a photographer, on assignment, but also just exploring, looking for stories, I suppose. His gaze met hers again, and Ilara felt a surprising jolt. It was as if he was looking not just at her, but wide through her, seeking the stories hidden within. Well, Starfall Cove has plenty of those, she said, a little breathlessly. Old legends, fishing tales, lighthouse mysteries. He smiled, a genuine warmth radiating from him. I look forward to hearing them. He stayed for a good hour, quietly reading, occasionally glancing up to observe the comings and goings of the few early customers. Ilara found herself stealing glances at him too, admiring the way the light caught the silver threads in his dark hair, the thoughtful frown that creased his brow as he read. When he finally stood to leave, he placed the poetry book gently back on the shelf. Thank you, Ilara, he said, his voice still low and warm. For the coffee, the scone, and the quiet, I think I'll be back. And with another nod and a shared smile, he was gone, leaving behind a lingering scent of rain and coffee, and a distinct emptiness in the sunlit corner of the story nook. Ilara found herself humming a tune she hadn't hummed in years as she returned to her book, though her focus was now decidedly elsewhere. The quiet hum beneath her usual contentment had grown louder, a gentle melody of anticipation. Liam did come back. He returned the very next day, and the day after that, and soon, his presence became as much a part of Ilara's morning routine as the lighthouse's beam. He'd arrive around the same time, usually just after the initial morning rush, order his black coffee and a different pastry each time, a croissant, a muffin, a slice of lemon loaf, and settle into his preferred spot by the window. He was a man of few words initially. His conversations with Ilara were brief, but always meaningful. They talked about books, of course, their shared love for literature and natural bridge between them. He introduced her to authors she hadn't explored, and she, in turn, recommended forgotten classics and local tales. He had a particular fondness for historical fiction and travelogues, while Ilara's heart belonged to gentle romances and fantastical adventures. Despite their differing tastes, they found common ground in the power of storytelling itself. I think, he mused one afternoon, looking out at the rain streaking down the windowpane, that stories are like whispers. They carry truths, hopes, fears, across time and distance, from one heart to another. Ilara paused, dusting a copy of Wuthering Heights. Whispers, she repeated softly. Yes, I like that. Like the wind through the pines or the waves on the shore. Always there, if you listen closely enough. He turned from the window, his blue eyes locking with hers. Exactly, and your shop. It's a place where all those whispers collect, a symphony of quiet voices. Her cheeks warmed under his intense gaze. No one had ever described her beloved story nook quite like that. It made her see her shop, and her life, in a new, more profound light. Liam wasn't just observing the books, he was observing her. Ilara felt it in the way his gaze would linger on her for a moment longer than necessary, in the subtle shift of his posture when she spoke, in the way he'd remember a small detail she'd mentioned days ago. He was attentive, thoughtful, and slowly, gently, he was chipping away at the quiet walls Ilara had built around her heart. She, in turn, found herself increasingly fascinated by him. She wondered about his travels, the places he'd seen, the stories he'd gathered. There was a quiet melancholy in his eyes sometimes, a hint of past adventures or perhaps past sorrows that made her want to know more, to understand what lay beneath the calm surface. He rarely spoke of himself, preferring to listen, to ask questions about Starfall Cove, about her life there. One blustery afternoon, a particularly fierce gust of wind rattled the old windows of the story nook, sending a shiver through the room. Liam, who was sketching in a small notebook at his usual table, looked up. Sounds like the sea is in a mood today, he commented, his voice a low counterpoint to the wind's howl. "It often is in autumn," Ilara replied, adjusting a display of new cookbooks. "Grandfather used to say the sea was a mirror of the human heart, sometimes calm, sometimes tempestuous, always deep." Liam's pencil paused. He looked at her, a thoughtful expression on his face. "Your grandfather sounds like he was a wise man." "He was," she said, a soft smile touching her lips at the memory. "He taught me everything I know about Starfall Cove, about finding beauty in the small things, and about listening to the stories the world tells you." He closed his notebook, placing the pencil carefully inside. "Do you ever feel like leaving Starfall Cove, Ilara? Seeing more of the world?" The question hung in the air, unexpected. Ilara considered it. "Sometimes," she admitted honestly. "I love my home, but there's a part of me, the part that reads all those adventure stories, that longs for wider horizons. But then I think of leaving the story nook, leaving the lighthouse, the smell of the sea, and I realize how deeply rooted I am here." She shrugged, a little self-consciously. "Perhaps I'm just not brave enough." Liam leaned forward slightly, his gaze unwavering. "Bravery isn't about leaving, Ilara. It's about living authentically wherever you are. And sometimes, the bravest thing is to find your own adventure right where you stand." He paused, then added, "Though, a little journey now and then can certainly open your eyes to new perspectives." She met his gaze, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was the kind of understanding, gentle observation that made her feel seen, truly seen, in a way she hadn't been before. "Have you always traveled, Liam?" she ventured, a rare question about his own life. He leaned back, a slight wistfulness entering his expression. "Since I finished university, I worked for a bit, in a city, but it never quite felt right. Too much noise, too many concrete walls. The world felt too small. So I packed a bag, bought a camera, and started writing about what I saw. It's been an education." "And you prefer it?" He thought for a moment. "I prefer the freedom, the chance to immerse myself in different places, different lives. But even a wanderer needs a place to rest, to process." He looked around the story nook, his gaze softening. "This place, for instance, it's a connection." Ilara felt a blush creep up her neck. A connection. The word settled gently between them, unspoken but felt. Untry. As the days shortened and the chill of late autumn truly set in, Liam's visits became less about seeking refuge from the elements and more about seeking her company. Their conversations stretched longer, delving into topics beyond books and weather. They talked about dreams, about fears, about the quiet joys and subtle heartbreaks of life. Ilara learned that Liam had a dry wit that often caught her off guard, making her laugh out loud, a sound that was rare in the quiet confines of her shop. She discovered he had a deep respect for nature, spending hours walking the cliff paths, sketching the gnarled trees and the crashing waves. He'd sometimes bring her a small gift, a perfectly smooth pebble, a particularly vibrant autumn leaf, a photograph had taken of the lighthouse at dawn, capturing its stoic beauty. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and fiery orange, Ilara was locking up the story nook when she saw Liam standing outside, leaning against the old stone wall next to her shop. He was looking out towards the sea, his hands tucked into his pockets, a thoughtful silhouette against the fading light. "Liam?" she called, a note of surprise in her voice. He rarely stayed this late. He turned, a faint smile gracing his lips. "Ilara, I was just enjoying the view. The way the light fades over the water here is something else." "It is," she agreed, stepping out and pulling the door shut behind her. The sea air was sharp, carrying the scent of salt and seaweed. She wrapped her arms around herself. "Are you heading back to your cottage?" He'd rented a small rustic cottage on the edge of town, overlooking the bay. "Eventually. I was wondering, would you mind a walk, just along the beach, if you're not too tired?" Ilara's heart gave a little leap. This was new. Usually their interactions were confined to the shop. "I'd like that," she said, perhaps a little too eagerly. "Let me just grab my scarf." She dashed back inside, retrieved a thick woolen scarf and her grandfather's old fisherman's coat from the hook by the door. When she emerged, Liam was waiting, his gaze warm. He fell into step beside her as they walked towards the path leading down to the beach. The pebbles crunched under their feet as they walked, the sound mixing with the rhythmic whisper of the incoming tide. The air was cool and invigorating, and the last vestiges of daylight painted the distant horizon in hues of rose and gold. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Ilara murmured, pulling her coat tighter. "Even on a chilly evening." "More so, perhaps," Liam replied, his voice soft, almost lost in the wind. "There's an honesty to it. No hiding the edges, no pretending." They walked in comfortable silence for a while. The kind of silence that wasn't empty but full of shared understanding. Ilara felt a sense of ease she hadn't experienced with anyone else. With Liam, she didn't have to fill the quiet. She could simply exist. "You know," Liam said finally, his voice a little rougher now, "I often feel a bit like a ghost, passing through places observing, but never quite belonging. But here, in Starfall Cove, and especially in your shop, I feel a little more solid." Ilara stopped, turning to face him. The last light of day illuminated his strong profile, casting shadows across his face. "You're not a ghost, Liam," she said gently. "You're a man who carries the weight of many stories, and perhaps the longing for one of your own." He looked at her then, his blue eyes intense in the dim light. "Perhaps," he whispered, a rare vulnerability in his voice. "And you, Ilara, what story do you long for?" Her breath hitched. The question was so direct, so personal. She looked out at the vast expanse of the ocean, the endless horizon. "I've always loved stories of quiet courage," she began, her voice barely audible above the waves. "Of finding magic in the everyday, of connections that feel like destiny. I suppose I long for a story where I'm not just the reader, but the heroine. One where the whispers turn into something real, something lasting." She risked a glance at him and saw a warmth in his eyes that made her heart pound. He reached out, slowly, and gently brushed a stray strand of hair from her face, his fingers lingering for a moment against her cheek. The touch was light, electrifying, sending a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. "I think," Liam said, his voice barely a murmur, "that your story is just beginning, Ilara." The lighthouse beam swept over them then, bathing them in its momentary light, a silent witness to the quiet unraveling of two hearts, poised on the precipice of something new and beautiful. The whispers of the sea, the whispers of old stories, and the whispers of a burgeoning feeling between them seemed to converge, promising more to come. Ilara felt a surge of hope, a tingling anticipation that warmed her from the inside out. Her story indeed felt like it was just beginning. His fingers, warm and reassuring, found hers, intertwining with a natural ease that sent a shiver of delight through Ilara. The lighthouse beam arced away, leaving them in the soft, moonlit darkness once more, but the warmth of his touch remained, a steady anchor against the vastness of the sea. They stood there for a long moment, the world distilled to the sound of the waves and the quiet beating of their own hearts, before Rhys stirred, a soft sigh escaping him. "We should probably head back," he murmured, his thumb stroking the back of her hand. "It's getting late, and the wind is picking up." Ilara nodded, her voice caught somewhere in her throat. The journey back down the winding path felt different now, imbued with a new significance. Every rustle of the seagrass, every distant cry of a gull, seemed to echo the silent conversation that had just passed between them. Rhys kept her hand firmly in his, a silent promise of connection, and Ilara found herself leaning ever so slightly into his presence, feeling a sense of belonging she hadn't realized she was craving. When they reached the base of the lighthouse, the sturdy stone structure seemed to hum with a quiet energy, a silent sentinel watching over their budding connection. Rhys led her to his cottage, the small, welcoming light spilling from its windows a beacon in itself. Would you like to come in for a moment?" he asked, his voice a little gruff, a hint of vulnerability in his tone. "I could make some tea, or something stronger if you prefer." Ilara's smile was soft. "Tea sounds perfect, Rhys." Inside, the cottage was warm and smelled faintly of old books and something savory, perhaps a recent meal. It was cozy, lived in, and utterly charming, much like its owner. Rhys moved with an easy grace, putting on the kettle, his broad back to her as he fussed with mugs. Ilara sat on a plush armchair by the window watching him, feeling a deep contentment settle over her. The silence wasn't awkward. It was comfortable, pregnant with anticipation. He brought her a steaming mug of Earl Grey, sweetened just how she liked it, and then settled onto the opposite armchair, their knees almost touching. The lamplight cast a warm glow on his face, highlighting the crinkles at the corners of his eyes when he smiled. "So," he began, his gaze steady. Your story is just beginning, Ilara. What chapter are we on now, do you think? Ilara chuckled, a genuine, unburdened sound. I think we've just finished the prologue, Rice, and the first chapter is about to unfold. She took a sip of her tea, the warmth spreading through her. What does your intuition tell you about this chapter? Reese leaned forward, his eyes twinkling. My intuition, which rarely fails me, tells me it's going to be a very good chapter, full of light, laughter, and perhaps a few shared adventures. He paused, then added, and maybe a really good meal. Ilara laughed again. A meal? Is that your idea of adventure, lighthouse keeper? A well-prepared meal, shared with good company, can be an adventure in itself, he countered, a playful glint in his eyes. Especially if it's prepared by me. I make a mean fish pie. A fish pie, you say? Ilara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Is that an invitation, Mr. Thorne? It absolutely is, Miss Vance, he confirmed, his smile widening. Tomorrow evening, if you're free? I'd love to, Reese, she said, her heart doing a little flutter. I'd love that very much. They talked for a while longer, the conversation flowing easily from the mundane to the meaningful. Ilara found herself telling him about her design dreams, the joy she found in creating spaces that brought people comfort, and the ache of her past failures. Reese listened intently, his gaze unwavering, offering quiet encouragement and understanding. He spoke of his love for the sea, the profound solitude of the lighthouse, and the unexpected joy of connection he'd found in her presence. The moon was high in the sky when Ilara finally stood to leave. At the door, Reese hesitated, then gently reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. His touch was feather-light, sending a shiver of warmth through her. He leaned in slowly, giving her ample time to pull away, but Ilara found herself leaning into him, her eyes drifting closed. This time their kiss was slower, deeper, a tender exploration of the feelings that had been brewing between them. It tasted of tea and sea salt, and the promise of something truly special. Good night, Ilara, he whispered against her lips, his voice husky. Good night, Reese, she replied, her voice barely a breath. She walked back to her own cottage feeling lighter than she had in years, a spring in her step and a joyful hum in her heart. The scent of Reese, a mix of sea air and comforting earthiness, lingered on her skin. Her story indeed was just beginning, and she couldn't wait to turn the page. The next evening, Ilara dressed with a flutter of nerves she hadn't felt in ages. She chose a soft, flowy dress the color of seafoam, feeling a strange mix of excitement and vulnerability. Walking the short distance to Rise's cottage, the evening air crisp and fresh, she felt like she was stepping into a new chapter of her life. Reese greeted her at the door, a warm smile lighting up his face. He was wearing a casual shirt, sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms. The cottage was filled with the delicious aroma of baking fish and herbs. A small vase with wildflowers sat on the table, a thoughtful touch that made Ilara's heart swell. Welcome, he said, stepping aside. The pie is almost ready. I hope you're hungry. Starving, she admitted, her gaze sweeping around the cozy room. It smells incredible, Reese. They settled down for dinner, and the fish pie was, as promised, exquisite. Flaky pastry, tender fish, and a creamy sauce. It was comfort food elevated to an art form. As they ate, they talked, sharing anecdotes from their day, Ilara telling him about a new sketch she'd started for a local cafe, Reese recounting a particularly stubborn piece of equipment at the lighthouse. You know, Ilara said, setting down her fork, I haven't felt this inspired in years. Being here with the sea, the lighthouse, and you, it's like my creativity has been reawakened. Reese looked genuinely pleased. That's wonderful to hear, Ilara. I always thought this place had a special kind of magic. And seeing you here, it feels like the island itself is breathing a little easier. After dinner, Reese insisted on doing the dishes, dismissing her offers to help with a gentle wave of his hand. Ilara watched him, mesmerized by the quiet efficiency of his movements. He seemed so grounded, so at peace with himself and his world. It was a stark contrast to the frantic energy that had often defined her life in the city. Later, they sat by the small, crackling fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows on the walls. Reese had put on some soft instrumental music, and the atmosphere was one of profound tranquility. Elara found herself sharing more about her past, the pressure she'd felt in her career, the burnout that had led her to St. Jude's Isle. She spoke of the fear of failure, the internal critic that often stifled her creativity. Rhys listened, his hand occasionally reaching out to gently squeeze hers. "It takes immense courage to walk away from something that's no longer serving you, Elara," he said, his voice soft but firm. "And even more courage to start fresh, especially when the wounds are still raw. What you're doing now here is a testament to your strength, not your weakness." His words were a balm to her soul, a validation she hadn't realized she desperately needed. "Thank you, Rhys," she whispered, her eyes welling up slightly. "That means a lot." He smiled, a gentle, reassuring smile. "You deserve to thrive, Elara, and you deserve to be happy. Don't let anyone, especially not yourself, tell you otherwise." That night, as Elara walked back to her cottage, the lighthouse beams sweeping over her path, she felt a profound sense of gratitude. Rhys wasn't just charming. He was kind, perceptive, and had a quiet strength that made her feel safe. With him, she felt seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. Days turned into weeks, each one weaving a richer tapestry of their burgeoning relationship. They fell into an easy rhythm, a blend of shared moments and respectful independence. Elara spent her mornings sketching and working on her cottage, transforming it into a haven of her own design. Rhys tended to the lighthouse, its rhythmic beam a constant presence in their lives. Their evenings, however, became their sacred time. They explored the island together, hidden coves where the water was impossibly clear, ancient paths winding through gnarled trees, and the small, bustling village market where they'd haggle playfully for fresh produce and local crafts. They'd share picnics on the beach, watching the waves roll in, or cook together in one of their cottages, creating simple, delicious meals filled with laughter and easy conversation. Elara found herself sketching Rhys often, his profile against the sunset as he gazed out at the sea, his strong hands as he mended a fishing net, the quiet intensity in his eyes when he talked about the lighthouse. These weren't for clients, they were for herself, a way to capture the essence of a man who was quickly becoming central to her world. One blustery afternoon, a particularly fierce storm rolled in, whipping the sea into a frenzy. Elara found herself feeling a little restless, the wind howling around her cottage. She decided to walk up to the lighthouse, knowing Rhys would be there, tending to his duties. She found him in the lantern room, the powerful beam cutting through the rain-lashed darkness, illuminating the churning gray sea. He was checking the mechanisms, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Rough one tonight," he said, turning to her, a smile touching his lips when he saw her. "What brings you up here in this weather?" "Just wanted to see if you needed company," Elara replied, leaning against the sturdy railing, watching the storm rage outside. "And maybe a hot cup of tea." She'd brought a thermos with her. Rhys chuckled, a warm sound that resonated with the storm outside. "You're a lifesaver, Elara." They stood together for a long time, sipping tea, watching the relentless power of the sea. Elara felt a profound sense of peace standing beside him, the storm outside a dramatic backdrop to their quiet connection. It was moments like these, simple yet deeply intimate, that she cherished most. She realized that Rhys didn't try to fix her or distract her from her past. He simply was there, a steady presence that allowed her to be herself, flaws and all. "You know," Rhys said softly, breaking the silence, "when I first came here after I left the Coast Guard, I thought I'd be alone forever. Just me and the sea, and that was fine. I'd made my peace with it." He paused, his gaze fixed on the stormy horizon. "But then you arrived, like a new light on the horizon, and suddenly, my peace feels fuller, brighter." Elara's heart ached with tenderness. She reached out, her hand finding his, squeezing it gently. "I felt the same, Rhys. I thought I'd lost my way, lost my purpose. But you, this island, it's like a compass point for my soul." He turned to her then, his eyes searching hers, full of a deep unspoken emotion. He leaned in, and their kiss was a slow, tender affirmation, a silent promise exchanged amidst the roar of the storm and the steady pulse of the lighthouse beam. And now, Elara started to take on small design projects on the island. A quaint bookstore wanted a cozy reading nook, a local bakery needed a refreshed display area. She found joy in these smaller, more personal projects, infusing them with the warmth and character of St. Jude's Isle. Reese was her biggest cheerleader, offering practical advice and always ready to listen to her ideas. One afternoon, Ilara was sketching a design for a new community center, a project she felt particularly passionate about. She was struggling with the layout, feeling the old familiar pangs of self-doubt creeping in. Just then, Reese appeared at her door, a basket of freshly picked berries in his hand. "Thought you might need a break," he said, seeing the furrow in her brow. "And some fuel for that brilliant mind of yours." He sat beside her, gently taking the sketchbook. His eyes scanned her intricate drawings, not with judgment, but with genuine interest. "This is beautiful, Ilara. But what's bothering you?" "It's the flow," she confessed. "I want it to feel open and inviting, but also create distinct areas for different activities. I just can't seem to make it work without feeling disjointed." Reese studied the sketch for a moment longer, then pointed to a specific section. "What if you used the natural light from this window here to define the reading area? And instead of a solid wall for the activity space, perhaps a series of movable screens or even a large custom-designed bookshelf. It would allow for flexibility, but still offer a sense of separation when needed." Ilara stared at the page, her eyes widening. It was such a simple, elegant solution, one that had completely eluded her. "Reese, that's brilliant. Why didn't I think of that?" He chuckled, a quiet, rumbling sound. "Sometimes a fresh pair of eyes can see things differently. You have the vision, Ilara. I just offer a different perspective, perhaps from a lighthouse keeper's view, always looking for the clearest path." His insight not only solved her design dilemma but also touched a deeper chord within her. He wasn't just admiring her, he was actively engaging with her work, offering thoughtful support that helped her grow. That evening, as they shared the sweet berries, Ilara felt a profound connection, a true partnership unfolding. Why? As autumn settled over St. Jude's Isle, bringing with it cooler temperatures and a palette of fiery colors, Ilara and Reese's relationship deepened further. They found comfort in their shared silences, a testament to the profound understanding that had blossomed between them. Ilara no longer felt the need to fill every quiet moment with chatter. She simply reveled in Reese's presence, his hand often finding hers, a silent anchor. One crisp Saturday morning, Reese suggested a trip to the mainland. "There's a small antique market a couple of towns over," he explained. "I thought you might find some inspiration for your designs, and I'm always on the lookout for interesting nautical bits for the cottage." Ilara was thrilled. It was their first real outing off the island together, a step beyond their familiar haven. The ferry ride was invigorating, the salty spray on their faces, the gulls circling overhead. On the mainland, they wandered hand in hand through the bustling market, Ilara's eyes lighting up at the sight of vintage furniture and antique textiles, Rice carefully examining old maps and brass instruments. Ilara found a beautiful, intricately carved wooden chest, perfect for storing her design samples. Reese, ever practical, helped her negotiate a fair price and then insisted on carrying it for her, despite her protests. As they walked back to the ferry, laden with their treasures, Ilara felt a surge of pure joy. This was it, she realized. This easy companionship, this shared adventure, this feeling of being utterly at home with another person. Back on the island, as the last rays of the setting sun painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, they sat on the porch of Ilara's cottage, sipping warm cider. The wooden chest sat beside them, a symbol of their shared day. "Thank you, Reese," Ilara said softly, leaning her head on his shoulder. "Today was perfect." He wrapped an arm around her, pulling her closer. "Every day with you is perfect, Ilara." He paused, his voice dropping to a serious tone. "I know we haven't talked much about the future, but I want you to know whatever your dreams are, whatever you want to build here on the island, I'm here. To help, to support, to simply be beside you." Ilara lifted her head, meeting his gaze. His eyes held a depth of sincerity that took her breath away. "And I'm here for you too, Reese," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "For your lighthouse, for your quiet life, for whatever adventures lie ahead. My story might have just begun, but I can't imagine any of its future chapters without you in them." He smiled, a slow, tender smile that reached his eyes. He leaned in, and their kiss was a promise, a silent vow exchanged under the vast, star-dusted sky, with the unwavering beam of the lighthouse sweeping over them, a constant reminder of the light they had found in each other. The whispers of the sea, the whispers of old stories, and the whispers of a love that had taken root deeply in their hearts seemed to converge once more, promising more, always more to come. The world, illuminated by the sweeping beam and the softer glow of the moon, felt utterly new and yet profoundly ancient, as if this kiss had been destined since the very first tide. When Rhys finally pulled back, his thumbs tracing the curve of Alara's cheekbones, his eyes were alight with a tenderness that stole her breath. "Alara," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against the sound of the waves. You truly are a marvel." A blush bloomed on her cheeks, warm and sweet. She found she couldn't speak, her heart still thrumming with the echo of his lips on hers, the exquisite taste of promise. Instead, she simply leaned into his touch, her fingers intertwining with his where they rested on her face, a silent affirmation of all that had passed between them. The night air, crisp and invigorating, no longer felt cold, but held the gentle warmth of shared understanding. They stood like that for a long time, simply existing in the space of their newfound connection, the lighthouse beam circling them like a protective arm, the sea a constant witness. Eventually, a shiver, not of cold but of the day's lingering chill, rippled through Alara. Rhys noticed instantly. "Come," he said, his voice soft. "Let's get you inside. It's getting late, even for us night owls." He took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring, and led her along the path towards her cottage, the familiar route now imbued with a shimmering new significance. At her door, he paused, turning to face her. The intimacy that had blossomed under the stars now had to navigate the more mundane realities of goodbyes, even temporary ones. He lifted her hand, turning it over to press a soft kiss into her palm, a gesture so gentle it made her heart ache in the sweetest way. "Good night, Alara," he whispered, his gaze intense. Dream of whatever makes you smile." "Good night, Rhys," she replied, her voice a little shaky. "And you." She watched him walk back towards the lighthouse, his silhouette strong and steady against the moonlight, until he disappeared into the tower. Inside her cottage, the warmth of the fire still radiated from the hearth, a comforting presence. Alara felt as though every fiber of her being was humming. She touched her lips, still tingling from his kiss, and a soft, wondering smile spread across her face. Sleep, she knew, would be a long time coming, filled instead with the joyous replay of the evening and the thrilling anticipation of what tomorrow might bring. The next morning dawned with a soft, misty light, casting a pearlescent glow over the island. Alara woke feeling impossibly refreshed, despite the late night. The memory of Rhys's kiss, his words, the feel of his hand in hers, was a vibrant thread woven through her consciousness. She felt lighter, brighter, as if a long-held breath had finally been released. After a quick breakfast, she found herself drawn to her studio, but not to work. Instead, she simply sat, gazing out at the sea, a profound sense of peace settling over her. Her artistic eye, usually so keen to capture the world, now saw everything through a filter of burgeoning happiness. The wild beauty of the coast, the endless expanse of the ocean, the steadfast presence of the lighthouse, it all seemed to reflect the beauty she felt within. A gentle rap on her cottage door startled her out of her reverie. Her heart gave a little leap. She knew, instinctively, who it would be. Opening the door, she found Rhys standing there, a thermos in one hand and a small basket in the other. He was dressed in his usual sturdy clothes, but his eyes held a softness that melted her. "Morning, Alara," he said, a warm smile playing on his lips. "I hope I'm not disturbing you. I thought you might appreciate some fresh coffee and a pastry. Old Mrs. Henderson in the village bakes the most incredible apple turnovers on a Tuesday." Alara's smile widened. "Rhys, you're a lifesaver, and you're never a disturbance." She stepped aside, inviting him in. The cottage, which had felt cozy before, now felt imbued with a new kind of warmth with him in it. He placed the thermos and basket on her small kitchen table. "I was just about to do my morning checks, but I wanted to make sure you were awake and, that you weren't regretting anything from last night." His voice was low, a hint of vulnerability in it. Alara walked over to him, reaching out to gently touch his arm. "Never," she said, her voice firm, her gaze meeting his. "Never a single regret, Rhys. Quite the opposite, in fact. His face softened with relief, and he covered her hand with his own. "Good," he murmured. "Because I certainly don't." He squeezed her hand before releasing it, moving to pour them each a cup of coffee. They sat at her kitchen table, sharing the delicious turnovers and steaming coffee, talking about small things. The weather, a new book Alara had started, a minor repair Reese needed to make on one of the lighthouse mechanisms. But beneath the surface of their casual conversation, there was a palpable hum of connection, a silent language spoken through lingering glances and shared smiles. It was a comfortable, easy intimacy that felt both new and deeply familiar, as if their souls had always known each other. As he prepared to leave for his duties, Reese paused by the door. "I'll be busy with some maintenance this afternoon, but perhaps we could have dinner together tonight? My place? I could make that fish stew you liked." "I'd love that, Reese," Alara replied, her heart swelling with warmth. "What time?" "Around 7? I'll send a flash from the lamp room to let you know when it's ready." He winked, a charming glint in his eye, and then he was gone, leaving Alara with a lingering scent of coffee and the sweet promise of an evening spent in his company. The day passed in a pleasant haze of anticipation. Alara found herself sketching, her hand moving with an unusual fluidity, capturing the essence of the sea and the lighthouse with a renewed vigor. She wasn't focusing on a specific project, but rather letting the joy flow through her fingertips, creating abstract forms and vibrant colors that spoke of light and connection. As evening approached, she dressed with a little more care than usual, choosing a soft, flowing dress in a deep sea green that complemented her auburn hair. At precisely 7 o'clock, a distinct rhythmic flash from the lighthouse beam caught her eye. Her smile widened. Reese, ever dependable, ever thoughtful. Walking to the lighthouse, the air was cooler now, filled with the salty tang of the incoming tide. The familiar climb up the winding stairs to Reese's living quarters was imbued with a sense of excitement. When she reached the top, the door was ajar, and the rich, savory aroma of his fish stew wafted out. Reese was there, apron-clad, stirring a pot on the stove. He turned, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Alara, come in, come in. The stew's almost ready." His living space was just as she remembered it, neat, functional, but with a comfortable, lived-in feel. Books lined a shelf, nautical charts adorned one wall, and a well-worn armchair sat by a window overlooking the churning sea. It felt profoundly in him. They sat at his small, sturdy table, the lamplight casting a warm glow over their faces. The fish stew was even better than she remembered, rich with herbs and tender pieces of fish. They talked easily, sharing anecdotes from their day, delving deeper into their pasts. Reese spoke of his childhood by the sea, of his grandfather, also a lighthouse keeper, who had instilled in him a deep respect for the ocean and the vital role of the light. Alara shared stories of her travels, of the vibrant cultures that had inspired her art, and the quiet ache she'd felt for a true home. "I always felt like a bit of a wanderer," Alara confessed, stirring her spoon through the last of her stew. "Always searching for a place where I truly belonged, where my art could truly root itself." She looked up, meeting his steady gaze. "I think I might have found it here, Reese. With you." His hand reached across the table, covering hers. "I hope so, Alara. More than anything, I hope so." His thumb stroked the back of her hand, a small, comforting gesture. "I felt a bit like that too, in a way. Dedicated to the light, but perhaps a little too solitary. You've brought a different kind of light into my life." After dinner, Reese led her up to the lamp room, a place she now considered sacred. The massive lens, polished to a brilliant sheen, rotated slowly, casting its powerful beam out into the inky blackness. They stood by the railing, side by side, watching the light sweep across the sea, across the distant horizon. "It's beautiful," Alara whispered, leaning her head against his shoulder. His arm came around her instantly, holding her close. "It's a beacon, isn't it? Not just for ships, but for everything." "It is," Reese agreed, his voice soft against her hair. "A constant, a guide." He kissed the top of her head. "Like you've become for me." The following days and weeks wove themselves into a beautiful tapestry of shared moments. Their routines, once separate, now intertwined seamlessly. Alara often brought her sketches and paints to the lighthouse, finding inspiration in the shifting light and the rhythmic hum of the machinery. Reese, in turn, would often join her for walks along the cliffs, pointing out ancient fossils embedded in the rock, or sharing local legends about shipwrecks and brave rescues. They cooked together, laughed together, and learned the quiet language of each other's presence. Elara discovered Rise's hidden talent for playing the harmonica, his soulful tunes echoing through the lighthouse on quiet evenings. Rhys learned of Elara's fascination with ancient folklore, and would often surprise her with books on forgotten island myths, leaving them on her doorstep. One blustery afternoon, a particularly fierce storm rolled in, whipping the sea into a frenzy. Elara, snug in her cottage, felt a familiar tremor of anxiety. The power of the storm was magnificent, but also daunting. She thought of Rhys, up in the lighthouse, battling the elements. Just as she was considering venturing out, there was a knock on her door. It was Rhys, bundled in his oilskins, his face ruddy from the wind. He carried a small, flickering lantern. "Rhys, what are you doing out here?" she asked, pulling him inside. "Just checking on you," he said, shaking the rain from his hat. "The wind's picking up, and I wanted to make sure your shutters were secure and that you had enough firewood. I also brought you a fresh loaf of sourdough from the village. Mrs. Henderson insists you need sustenance in a storm." He smiled, a comforting presence amidst the raging weather. Elara felt a wave of profound gratitude wash over her. "You didn't have to, Rhys. You have your own duties." "You're important to me, Elara," he said simply, his gaze unwavering. "My duties extend to making sure the light is tended, and that you are safe." He helped her secure a rattling window, then built up her fire, the crackling flames chasing away the chill. They sat by the hearth for a while, sipping hot tea, listening to the roar of the wind and the crashing waves. In the soft glow of the firelight, Elara found herself sharing a vulnerability she hadn't voiced before. "Sometimes," she began, tracing patterns on her teacup, "when the storms get really bad, I feel a little lost, small, like the island could just be swallowed by the sea. It makes me question everything, even my art. What's the point of creating beauty if it could all be gone in an instant?" Rhys listened patiently, his hand finding hers, his thumb rubbing soothing circles on her skin. "It's a natural feeling," he said, his voice calm and steady. "The sea is powerful, and it reminds us of our place. But think of it this way, Elara. Even in the fiercest storm, the lighthouse stands. Its light cuts through the darkness, steady and unwavering. It doesn't stop the storm, but it offers hope, a guide, a reminder that there's always solid ground, always a way forward." He looked at her, his eyes full of understanding. "Your art is like that, Elara. It's a light. It captures the beauty, the truth, the stories that might otherwise be lost. It's a testament to what endures, even when the world feels chaotic. It's a comfort, a whisper of hope, just like the lighthouse beam." His words were a balm to her soul, chasing away the shadows of doubt. He understood her, truly understood her, in a way no one else ever had. She leaned into him, resting her head on his shoulder, feeling utterly safe and cherished. "Thank you, Rhys," she whispered. "You always know just what to say." The storm eventually passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and sparkling under a brilliant sun. The incident, rather than creating distance, had only deepened their bond, forging a stronger connection built on trust and shared vulnerability. One sunny afternoon, Elara found Rhys in his workshop, meticulously repairing a small antique brass lantern. He looked up, smiling, as she entered. "What's this?" she asked, peering over his shoulder. "It's an old ship's lantern," he explained, holding up a delicate glass pane. "Belonged to my great-grandfather. It's been broken for years, and I finally decided to fix it. A bit of a passion project." Elara watched him, admiring the patience and precision with which he worked. "It's beautiful," she said. "Full of history." He nodded. "Every scratch, every dent tells a story, just like us, I suppose." He paused, setting down a tiny tool. "Speaking of stories, there's a small festival coming up in the village next month. A celebration of the island's heritage. They're looking for local artists to display their work. I know you usually prefer your solitude, but it might be nice to share your talent with the community. And I'd be there, of course." He looked at her expectantly, a gentle encouragement in his eyes. Elara felt a familiar flutter of apprehension. While she loved her art, the thought of public display still made her nervous. Her work was so personal, so much a part of her soul. But then she remembered Reese's words during the storm, about her art being a light. And she looked at him, his steady gaze full of support. I'll think about it, she said, a small smile playing on her lips. It's a big step. No pressure, Ilara, he reassured her. Just an idea. Whatever you decide, I'll be proud of you. Over the next few weeks, the idea of the festival simmered in Ilara's mind. She found herself drawn to her older pieces, seeing them with fresh eyes, and also sketching new ones, inspired by the light, the sea, and the profound joy Reese had brought into her life. She started to see her work not just as an expression of her inner world, but as a potential bridge to others, a way to share the beauty she experienced. One evening, as they were having dinner at her cottage, the aroma of her homemade bread filling the air, Ilara looked at Reese. I've decided, she said, her voice a little nervous, but also firm. I'll do the festival. I want to share my work. Reese's face lit up. That's wonderful, Ilara. I knew you could do it. He reached across the table, taking her hand. What are you thinking of displaying? I want to create something new, she told him, her eyes sparkling with renewed purpose. Something that tells the story of this island, of the light, and of everything I've found here. Her gaze met his, and in her eyes he saw not just the artist, but the woman, brimming with quiet strength and blossoming love. The decision energized her. She spent countless hours in her studio, the canvas a vibrant landscape of colors and textures, each brushstroke infused with the emotions she felt. She painted the raw power of the sea, the enduring strength of the lighthouse, the delicate beauty of the island's flora, and the ethereal quality of the light itself. But woven into every piece was an unspoken narrative of connection, of finding home, of the steady, unwavering love that had taken root in her heart. Reese often visited her, bringing her tea, or simply sitting quietly, watching her work. He never offered critique, only encouragement, his presence a comforting anchor in her creative process. He saw the passion in her eyes, the dedication in her movements, and the profound beauty that emerged from her soul onto the canvas. As the festival date drew closer, Ilara felt a mix of excitement and nerves. She had chosen a series of 5 paintings, each depicting a different aspect of the island, culminating in a large central piece that showed the lighthouse beam cutting through a misty dawn, a solitary figure standing at its base, gazing out at the awakening world. It was a piece that spoke of hope, of new beginnings, and of the profound peace she had found. The day of the festival arrived, bright and clear. The village square was abuzz with activity, stalls laden with local crafts, food, and music. Reese was there, helping her set up her display, his calm presence a steadying force. He hung her paintings with care, stepping back to admire each one. They're magnificent, Ilara, he said, his voice full of genuine awe. Truly, you've captured the soul of this place. He looked at the central piece, his eyes lingering on the solitary figure. And a little bit of ours, I think. Ilara smiled, a shy, happy smile. Seeing her work displayed, surrounded by the lively atmosphere of the festival, felt less daunting than she had imagined. With Reese by her side holding her hand, she felt ready to share her light with the world. People began to wander through the stalls, and soon, a small crowd gathered around Ilara's display. Whispers of admiration, murmurs of appreciation, filled the air. She watched, a warmth spreading through her chest, as people connected with her art, seeing in it the beauty and spirit of the island they loved. A distinguished-looking woman with kind eyes and silver hair approached Ilara. These are truly stunning, she said, gesturing to the paintings. You've captured something truly special. The light in your work, it's almost alive. Ilara thanked her, feeling a rush of pride and joy. The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Albright, a retired art critic who had moved to the island years ago. She spoke with genuine insight about Ilara's technique, her use of color, and the emotional depth of her pieces. Reese stood beside Ilara, a protective and proud presence, his hand resting gently on the small of her back. He beamed at her, his eyes telling her everything she needed to know. This, she realized, was what belonging felt like. This was home. As the day progressed, more and more people admired her work. A few pieces even sold, a testament to the connection she had forged with the community through her art. By late afternoon, when the sun began its slow descent towards the horizon, casting long, golden shadows across the square, Ilara felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Reese led her away from the bustle of the festival towards a quiet spot overlooking the sea. They sat on a low stone wall, watching the waves roll in, the air now cooler, carrying the scent of wood smoke and the lingering aroma of the festival's treats. "You were incredible today, Ilara," Reese said, his voice filled with pride. "Did you see how people responded to your work? You touched them." She leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling content and utterly at peace. "I couldn't have done it without you, Reese," she confessed. "You gave me the courage. You are my light." He wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "And you, Ilara, are the most beautiful painting I've ever seen. You've brought so much color into my life." They sat in comfortable silence for a long time, watching the sun dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and purple. The lighthouse, now far in the distance, began to pulse with its steady beam, a familiar and comforting rhythm. The whispers of the sea, the whispers of old stories, and the whispers of their deepening love seemed to converge once more, promising more, always more, to come. The journey of their hearts, like the tireless waves, continued, ever moving, ever evolving, under the watchful eye of the enduring light. He tightened his arm around her, a silent anchor against the vastness of the ocean. The air, cooled by the sea breeze, carried the scent of salt and possibility. She nestled deeper into his side, her heartbeat a gentle rhythm against his chest. "It feels," she murmured, her voice soft as the lapping waves, "like we've found our forever in this one perfect moment." He turned his head, his gaze sweeping over her profile, illuminated by the nascent moonlight. "And yet," he countered, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through her, "I feel like we've only just begun." He shifted, turning fully to face her, his hand gently tilting her chin so their eyes met. In their depths, she saw not just love, but a reflection of the enduring light from the distant beacon, a steady promise. "This journey," he began, his thumb tracing the line of her jaw, "the one that brought us to this particular shore, under this particular sky. It was winding and sometimes uncertain, but every step, every whisper of the wind, every turn in the road, led me to you. And now that I'm here, with you, I can't imagine a future that doesn't hold this same warmth, this same certainty." She felt a tear escape, tracing a path down her cheek, but it was a tear of profound joy, not sorrow. "I feel it too," she whispered, her hand finding his and lacing their fingers together. "Like my heart finally found its true north. And it's always pointed to you." He smiled, a slow, tender curve that reached his eyes. Reaching into his pocket, he produced a small, smooth pebble, perfectly round and pearlescent, picked from the very beach they stood upon. It wasn't a diamond, but in its simple beauty it held more meaning than any gem. "This isn't a grand gesture, my love," he said, holding it out to her, "but a symbol of the enduring beauty of what's real, of what's found right here, in the natural world, in the heart of things, just like our love." He took her hand, placing the pebble in her palm, then closing her fingers around it. "Will you build a life with me here, by the sea, under the watchful eye of our lighthouse? Will you let our story continue, not just in whispers, but in every sunrise, every shared meal, every quiet evening spent listening to the waves?" Her heart swelled, encompassing the vastness of the ocean, the endless sky, and the profound depth of his proposal. "Yes," she breathed, the word a joyous exhalation, 1,000 times. "Yes." She leaned in, her lips finding his in a kiss that tasted of salt and forever, a promise sealed under the vast star-dusted canvas of the night. They stayed there long after the moon had fully risen, painting a silver path across the water. The lighthouse continued its faithful pulse, a silent witness to their vows. In the coming days, they would find a small cottage nestled among the dunes, its windows looking out to the endless blue, its porch a perfect perch for morning coffee and evening stories. They would walk the beaches, hand in hand, collecting treasures, planting a garden, and filling their home with laughter and the quiet comfort of shared dreams. And as the years unfolded, their love, like the tireless waves, would continue, ever moving, ever evolving. The whispers of the sea would become the lullaby of their lives, and the enduring light of the lighthouse, a constant reminder that some journeys are meant to last a lifetime, guiding them home, always home, to each other. Their hearts, entwined like the very currents of the ocean, beat in perfect harmony, a testament to a love as vast and timeless as the sea itself.